So this is the perfectly dismal The Majority Report, starring Sam Seder and Emma Vigeland. One of the big part of the gender ideology is the demonization, cancellation, and harassment and downright slander of anybody who questions the medical interventions they do on so-called trans kids. So this video was recorded about 2020, and this is when the identitarian left was in full force going after anybody who questions the medicalization of children and the biggest medical scandal in the history of medicine that's unfolding right now with the action of both the WPATH and the CATH report, which are included in this presentation. Now, I want you to notice that Emily Vigeland is really fanatical about this subject. She'll go after anybody, and all of them will go after anybody who dares question anything, even the slightest disagreement on so-called trans rights, and how vicious and vitriol and how they actively try to get people fired and deplatformed and women silenced. I want you to notice how little Emily Vigeland understands this issue, how she doesn't understand puberty, or you can transition before you go puberty, or you can transition after you go puberty. She's completely clueless on it. This fuels her rage regarding the people who question any of these practices. So I'm putting this up there because this is a critical part of the reason why the medical scandal kept going on, why it wasn't stopped much earlier in its infancy, or as it was victimizing children and their parents. And the reason for why parents who had trans-identifying kids had to hide and go anonymous and not talk to people because they were truly afraid of their jobs. So I wanted to put this up here because this will be forgotten. Right now, as this recording, they have stopped talking about this. You don't see many episodes anymore about the evil trans or the evil TERFs. And this is because they're getting the message that there's something wrong in the paradise land here of trans gender affirming care. And they are realizing that they may end up actually being on the wrong side of history, which was apparent to anybody who's done a little research or digged under the issues. But they did not. They merely took the sophistry of this caller's, who's basically a trans activist, and they, them, he, she is coaching them and riling them up with a whole bunch of half-truths and lies, and with a few interesting things thrown in between. This includes some references to the PATH reports, references to the WPATH files. This also includes Jamie Reed's testimony. This includes WPATH's own internal conferences on how unsure they were. This also includes Marcy Bowers and top people at WPATH cut throughout this entire presentation to show you behind the scenes versus what these people are telling their audience and riling up their followers. And now we begin the perfectly horrible Majority Report.
Rapid onset gender dysphoria, and something that really irked me was some commenters talked about how, oh, well, you guys need to have people from the opposite viewpoint on your show because we need to have both sides represented.
What are the sides? One that supports trans people and one that doesn't?
Well, yeah, it's not a debate. It's like flat Earth. I call anti-trans people the flat Earth people of biology. So I was going to talk about that, and we can if you prefer, but I'm trying not to cry right now.
I'm so sorry.
I didn't know if you guys were aware of what just happened in Texas yesterday about trans people. So basically yesterday, Greg Abbott said that this stuff is illegal, this stuff is child abuse, and anybody who has a trans child who is trying to get gender affirming care for them is now doing something illegal, and the government is going to investigate them. And a trans individual's chance of suicide is doubled if they are rejected by their birth family. A trans individual's chance of suicide is doubled up to 13.1% if their religious community rejects them, or if they are forced into conversion therapy, quote unquote, which is really just psychological and physical abuse. If you give these kids and by kids, I say teenagers, 13 to 18-year-olds, puberty blockers or hormones when it's appropriate, their mental health drastically improves.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever people, especially people on the right and these old white hags say, oh, you're irreversibly damaging children, I am of a very strong opinion that children cannot make decisions like this for themselves. That's why you have puberty blockers. It's a somewhat controversial treatment that's getting more acceptance in the community. That looks like the only two side effects right now are possible sterility and some bone density issues. But it gives a pause so that kids can take time to know what they need to do. This whole issue of, we're forcing hormones on kids, we're doing sex change surgery, we're cutting off breasts and stuff. That's not how this stuff works. You cannot take a kid into a clinic and get a sex change. You cannot do it.
I know.
And these people fearmonger about this.
Yeah.
And you can't, there's not even a I dare these people to find a doctor who would perform sex reassignment surgery on a child. You can't do it. These surgeries are not done until you're 18.
My name is Dr. Johanna Olson. I'm the medical director for the Center for Trans Youth Health and Development at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. We have the largest trans youth clinic in the world with about 250 active patients and about 50 more that are on the waiting list waiting to get in.
So you can see we had, this is 13 years old, this is not a great pointer, but we had two young people who had chest surgery at 13, 5, at 14, 9, at 15, 9, at 16, and 8 at 17, and the rest 18 and older. So what type, well, some people weren't sure what type of surgery they had.
We'll see people as young as age 15 if they've been affirmed in their gender for a long period of time and don't really have any other life complications that make surgery.
That we need to really turn the table around to the individual to say, look, these are permanent, life-altering decisions that you're making, whether it's hormones or surgery.
At the least, as part of a group of medical professionals who are working together with multiple psychiatric referrals after years of hormones and lived experience as the other sex, or gender, rather. And it takes work, and they treat it like, oh, well, if your kid says he's a girl, quote unquote, you can just go drug him up. And that's not how it works. And people need to understand that.
I was working in a pediatric gender center for 4.5 years, primarily responsible for patient intakes. The center followed this message that transition would solve everything, that it would solve a child's mental health problems. There were very few written protocols or guidelines. One of the providers even said we were flying the plane as we built it. Doctors are acting like they're God when it comes to medically transitioning children. Children could identify themselves as transgender, see a therapist for one visit, see our endocrinologist for one visit, and end up with hormones that would impact and change their bodies for their lifetime. These were identities that were still shifting and changing, but the treatments were irreversible and permanent.
Do you have any, we know how horrible like the outright bigots and like the, Abbott sort of Republican type folks are. Do you have any comment for the type of journalists who've been sort of just asking questions and just reporting supposedly objectively? Is your perception been that people have been dishonest or irresponsible in that regard?
At this point, I am not a biologist. I'm a trans person. I have spent 3 months poring over peer-reviewed research of this stuff. the jury is out. Gender is real. You can change your sex. We know what we're doing. The only controversy among people that actually know what they're doing is puberty blockers.
Yeah.
There are some concerns that you have possible effects on cognitive capability in the future, that you may have some memory issues. We're not sure yet because it's relatively new.
But what really disturbs me is when the parents can't tell me what they need to know about a medical intervention that apparently they signed off for.
We've been doing these surgeries and studies with chromosomes and stuff since the 60s and before. We know how this stuff works. These idiots and Matt Walshes that go out there and scream about we're destroying the world and gender and all this sort of stuff, this ideology, it's complete bullshit.
Say they know when they really aren't picking up on what's happening. And so I think the more we can normalize that it is okay to not get this right away, it is okay to have questions, the more we're going to actually do a real informed consent process than what I think has been currently happening, and that I think is frankly not what we need to be doing ethically.
If people are denying this stuff, it's no different than creationists that deny the fact that life evolves and are trying to frame this false dichotomy of creation versus evolution.
This is all new. This is all contentious. And that's where we run into problems because everyone's afraid. And I know for a fact, people, even adults, even well-educated, older adults accessing care for the first time, sit down with the person who's going to prescribe their hormones, and they look at an informed consent form that says your hormones are going to do this, this, and this. They don't take any of that in because they're so scared that they're not going to get what they need. They just show me where to sign because this is my moment. I got to grab it, and they don't really take in the information.
I'm sorry that reality makes you upset with your fairy tale. You can believe what you want, but you don't get to make rules about it that everyone else has to live by.
I think some of the detransition comes in because the over-medicalization as well as over-binarying as well as just the pressures that people are under because of the opposition creates a dynamic that's very, very hard for all of us to work in.
I mean, agreed.
That's not how it works.
I'm fearful. I mean, one, and their kid basically saying, I don't feel this way. The parents being sympathetic, helping them transition before puberty, which would be helpful, or at least use puberty blockers. And the insinuation here is that validating your child's experience, which is necessary for their mental health and their growth as a healthy person.
I think now that I follow a lot of kids into their mid-20s, I'm always like, oh, the dog isn't doing it for you, right? Yeah, they're like, no, I just found this, wonderful partner and now we're kids and da-da-da. So I think, it doesn't surprise me, but I don't know still what to do for the 14-year-olds. The parents have it on their minds, but the 14-year-old, it's like talking with diabetic complications with a 14-year-old. They don't care.
Is criminal. And that's what's nuts about it, because more parents, honestly, should be open to this.
And it's to expand on what you just said, like the only thing you can do before puberty is a social transition. And that's the only thing the WPATH standards of care, which are one of the main international guidelines, suggests. There's a couple different ones, and one of the biggest ones is the WPATH standards of care. So it's not like you're going to be giving drugs to a prepubescent child.
Yeah.
That's not what happens. You give them puberty blockers whenever they reach, I think it's Tanner stage 2, and that pauses everything to give them time to figure out what's going on. I get so frustrated by the misinformation. And then you have people doing these word games and trying to put everything in neat little boxes.
When you institute puberty blockers at Tanner stage 2, one, you assure that person's never going to be able to reproduce. There's no way to extract sperm. My feeling is that if I had a child who was transgender, I would do whatever I could to get them through a little bit of puberty. One, so I can have grandchildren. Two, so they can have a sexual function. I hope I'm changing the informed consent model for people when they talk to children, because I don't think that anyone has ever really been able to put themselves and do true informed consent. And it's this wave of kids now that are just coming of age, readying themselves for surgery, that I'm concerned about, because I've dealt with hundreds of them already, and they're all very, very difficult.
You know, and this is just misogyny, if you think about it. We're not thinking about transgender women as sexual beings.
Well, because we never give testosterone back. You say, you know, it's different. That if you have precocious puberty, you go off your blockers, you go right through a female puberty. But we don't do that. We don't do that for our trans feminine growth. We don't give testosterone,
right.
And so they never. In my experience, they're never orgasmic.
Yeah, no, we're on the same page. We should not be discriminating against transgender kids, but medically, we do have to think about when we're instituting the puberty blockers, because it might be at a different time point in development. So we can, especially with the transgender girls, get them a little bit of a male puberty.
You can change sex. That's uncomfortable. That's weird in humans. Clownfish do it all the time. But these people are so set in their ways and so bigoted that if you don't have every single answer, then it's like, oh, well, you're just a crazy trans person who's pushing your ideology on kids.
Yeah.
Well, no, we know that this care cuts their suicide risk in half.
Yeah.
If we don't do this, they literally hurt and kill themselves.
A number of things. We started to see patients who were experiencing very significant medical harms, being rushed to the emergency room with lacerations requiring stitches. We had patients contact us who were begging to have body parts put back on within months of having surgeries. And the thing that kept happening is every time I would raise concerns and ask about the protocols and ask about the guidelines, this is just how the industry works. If a child says they're trans, there's no questioning it. I maybe would have 5 to 10 new incoming patients a month. By the time I left, it was close to 50 every single month. And my background is in clinical research, and so I started looking at the data. I wanted to know what the numbers told me. And towards the end of my tenure, 73% of the new patients coming to us were girls who were in their teen years. So in that really vulnerable age of like 13 to 16, where they are just exposed to so many social pressures, and they're so empathetic to what's going on around them too, that they really pick up on what's going on in their peer group.
Here is, if we can put up this exchange. He says, the gender ideology movement has secured millions in taxpayer funding to promote puberty blockers, double mastectomies, prosthetic genitalia, and bizarre sexual fetishes to children. It has to stop. That's not true. But here, Karadansky, who is an infamous TERF writer, responded to Rufo.
Another frequent Tucker guest too, by the way.
Yes, saying, hey, you didn't give me credit for this. Chris, you've been getting quite a bit of flack on here for jumping into the space without realizing that women, aka trans exclusionary feminists, have been at this for years. Here's my book in case you want to check it out and retweet. That would be very helpful. Basically, why are you not citing my hate work in your hate work?
This was never something that would start in adolescence. And these girls were also learning on TikTok, Instagram. They would come in and they would almost have the exact same storyline too. Like they learned what to say from a video to explain, oh no, really, I've felt this way from early childhood, but a lot of their parents couldn't remember anything like that. And part of what's going on right now is that if you question this at all, you are immediately called transphobic, you're immediately called homophobic, you're immediately considered a bigot, and it's just not scientific reality.
I was discriminating against these people and bigoted against them back when you were in diapers, buddy.
I was causing suicidal ideation way before you even thought about this.
And that's what's so Katie Herzog.
Look at the blood on my hands, and your hands are just
way bloodier,
soft, and like so clean.
Yeah, the blood on your hands is still wet.
Right. But while you find it, this is the point. This is the point. These TERF feminists are shocked that their right-wing views are being taken by right-wingers and they aren't getting credit because, I don't know if you know this, guys, the fact that you've been trafficking in hateful ideology means that hateful people are going to pick it up, and they also hate you. They also hate women because they're bigots. So this is just like, I'm sorry that the chickens have come home to roost for you hating trans people, and you're not getting, as Will of Chapo put it, the proper citation for your hate speech in their hate speech. And frankly, they're being dismissive of you because not only are they transphobic like you are, they're also sexist. So look at the bedfellows that you made. Congratulations, Katie Herzog. Enjoy your new fucking friends, because these are the people, your bedfellows, when you decide to hate on trans people. I love it. I love it. I hope they continue to cite your work without citation and that nobody else buys the rest of your books for the rest of your life.
Listen, can we all just agree that we don't like black people? Can we start there with our shared hatred of people from a different race? Of course, we wouldn't say hatred. I understand that, but we're in this together.
Is there no camaraderie anymore? Everyone's just tearing themselves apart on the anti-trans. But if you draw the line at trans feminists, you're not an intersectional feminist. And it's a right-wing hateful ideology. And so you're going to be in concert with other hateful bigots. Enjoy it.
I quit the National Aryan League to join the White Resistance Front because I felt like the National Aryan League just did not respect me as a woman and did not appreciate my feminist viewpoints.
Yeah.